Roanoke River, North Carolina's largest river by volume, has long served as a vital route for trade and travel, first by American Indians, who called it Moretuck, and later by European settlers. Originating in southwestern Virginia, the river winds its way through northeastern North Carolina toward the sea.
Daniel Weldon bought land in what we now know as Weldon in the 1750s. They developed an orchard. It was known by three names: Weldon's Orchard, Weldon's Place, and Weldon's Landing. Weldon's about 7 miles north of Halifax.
The town of Halifax was the place where we had the Halifax Resolves, April 12th, 1776. That's one of the two dates on the state flag. They wanted their delegates to go to the Constitutional Convention in Independence Hall in Philadelphia and vote to break away from Great Britain.
So you can think of Halifax as the political center, but Weldon was the commercial center. And it brought people from all over.
The river was surrounded by productive agricultural land, which drew settlers.
Rice Bolton Pierce, because he was captain in War of 1812, was given land in North Carolina, in Halifax County. He was given that land, and he created a farm, had 13 children.
And the farms were massive sizes, 30,000 acres, 40,000 acres. Socially and economically had a level of wealth that was equivalent to the Boston, Philadelphia crowd.
So my family's from Northampton County. We've lived in Northampton County since the mid-1700s, and we've farmed. We've all been farmers for the most part. The soil's very good, but then it comes with challenges. A lot of people that work riverland will say if you can ever get a crop up, then you're almost halfway there.
Primary cash crops were cotton, peanuts, sweet potatoes, and tobacco.
We enjoyed growing tobacco. Tobacco was one of those crops that you look forward to just before Christmas because it was when they paid off.
Unlike modern agriculture, farming was labor-intensive. Tobacco and cotton were picked by hand.
The cotton was picked by relatives who had the ability to be able to pick anywhere from 200 to 300 pounds per day.
We have much more land that's not available for row crop production, so you grow timber on that. Timber production's always been a very important piece of the Roanoke Valley.
Late 1700s, early 1800s, the rivers were our highways. The bateau boats, which could come down the river from the mountains, they used the Roanoke River to transport those goods. But when they got to the Roanoke Valley area, we have this area in the river of rocks. It's a distance of about 9 miles. The river drops in sea level about 100 feet. We're right on the divide of the Piedmont and Coastal Plain.
In 1812, the Roanoke Navigation Company was formed to build and maintain commercial navigation on the Roanoke and its tributaries.
The length of the contemplated canal around the Great Falls of the Roanoke is 8 1/6 miles, commencing at Rock Landing and terminating at a place called Weldon's Orchard, immediately below the Great Falls. There are now working on the canal 207 laborers, besides master workmen and overseers. The Milton Intelligencer, April 14, 1819.
A 9-mile network of canals, an aqueduct, locks and basins were completed in 1823 to bypass the falls above Weldon.
Once you got to Weldon, they could transfer the goods to larger boats on the river. Because it was the end of the canal, Weldon was just kind of the place that developed and grew. The first lots were sold off in 1820. So Weldon's where it's at because of the river, because of the rapids in the river, the convergence of commerce between the canal, the river boats. That was Weldon's start.
But rivers weren't Weldon's only pathways.
1832, the railroad rolls in. And there was a desire by the railroad companies to take those goods from the canal. Railroad companies wanted the goods to go to Petersburg or Norfolk and vice versa, goods that could go back upriver. Weldon was just the place that it all converged.
The striking thing to me is that between 1820 and 1843, when it was incorporated as Weldon, you had a canal built, an aqueduct built, and 4 railroads built, plus a 5th spur. In 23 years, that much happened in this little place.
Trains were a big business, and a big part of life in those days. The seaboard went from Raleigh to Portsmouth, and it crossed the Atlantic coastline, which was the north-south. Starting at 3rd Street was also a freight yard. There were probably 4 or 5 parallel tracks there, south 10 or 12 blocks.
Weldon became the largest railroad hub in the southeast.
Weldon to Baltimore Daily Line by the Portsmouth and Roanoke Railroad. The Roanoke Republican, March 8, 1843.
The rise of rail travel brought an influx of new residents from surrounding agricultural regions, further transforming Weldon into a thriving community.
My great-grandfather was Rufus Whitfield Daniel, and he came to Weldon from Northampton County, which is right across the Roanoke River from Weldon. And they lived in Old Elms in Weldon, and Rufus Whitfield had a store there in Weldon.
Great-grandfather was a doctor. They lived at Pierce's Crossroads. And then he decided to move into Weldon.
They came into Weldon to start businesses, and they ran farms. They were gentlemen farmers.
Weldon was a combination of frontier outpost and gentrifying small town.
Before it was Freed's, it was a saloon, so we used to dig down in that dirt floor and dig up bottles all the time. There was all these cool bottles.
Beginning in 1845, prominent citizens founded churches. First Weldon Methodist, then during the Civil War, Grace Episcopal and Weldon Baptist.
Almost everyone was involved in forming a church out of where one didn't exist before. And there were a number of churches that formed, and some are still here. The churches played just a critical role in the development of the business community and the progress that was made in Weldon.
Weldon evolved from a frontier settlement into a vital hub of commerce and transportation, marking a significant chapter in its enduring story. Because of its strategic importance, Weldon was robustly defended during the Civil War and never fell to Union forces. The end of the Civil War marked a period of significant economic struggle, widespread migration, and profound social change.
The Allies, they had a plantation of over 1,000 acres and unfortunately about 100 slaves. And then of course after the Civil War, that all ended. They started coming to Weldon.
Seeking employment on the railroad or in town, African Americans began coming to Weldon too. William David Smith, an enterprising young black man, arrived seeking opportunity and found work with Rufus Daniel in his store. The census of 1870 shows David Smith living in the household of Rufus and Narcissa Daniel, with son Walter and daughter Betty.
Walter went to Wake Forest, and he went to law school, and he became a lawyer, and then he became a state senator.
As business flourished, Rufus increasingly relied upon David's skills and reliability. Having learned to read and write, David capably managed the store, supervised inventory, and efficiently handled responsibilities. Narcissa Daniel helped found the Weldon Baptist Church in 1865. African American residents established key congregations, including First Baptist Church in 1866, St. Matthew's AME in 1871, and St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church in 1883.
Slavery had not been too long ended, but these people, they wanted something, and Weldon afforded them that. You know, it was the railroad and the river, and so they were able to get work and finance the building of the church.
Freedmen began to carve out a spot in the town's commercial and civic life, helping to reshape Weldon's future in the aftermath of emancipation.
I'm sure that the founding fathers of St. Peter's and others, they had no idea of the legacy that they were starting.
This legacy included a thriving merchant class that had long shaped Weldon's economic life.
Death of R.W. Daniel. He came to Weldon to live in 1853 at the age of 26 years, and 4 years later, 1857, began business for himself, which he continued with increasing prosperity to the day of his death. One of the oldest citizens of the place, he was respected by all, and his death removes a landmark which will not be soon forgotten. The Roanoke News, September 27, 1888.
As the original founders began to pass on, their businesses gradually transitioned to a new generation, one that included newly freed African Americans. David purchased and expanded the business, quickly establishing himself as a respected and influential figure within Weldon.
David Smith is not only one of the wealthiest men of his race in the state, but he has an eye to business and is one of the more progressive. The Roanoke News of October 1st, 1896.
Like other businessmen in town, David became a leader in the consumer economy that came to characterize Weldon in the second half of the 19th century, and that distinguished it from other southern towns.
By the 1890s, Weldon was growing quite a bit.
Every 15 minutes, a train would come through, be it a freight train or a passenger train.
At least 4 passenger trains would stop in Weldon. A lot of people getting off and on, and yeah, that was just the way people traveled in those days. Some of the cars were pretty nice too. I mean,
the train station was a double-decker. The Atlantic coastline was raised up real high. Right down next to the train station was the Weldon Hotel, which was a 3-story hotel. It was on First Street. I grew up with trains. I've got a picture taken in 1909 of Williams Jennings Bryan running for president doing a whistle stop in Weldon, and my grandfather is standing on the back of the train with him, and he introduced him.
my mother-in-law said she'd like to come to Weldon and spend the weekend with Miss Seifert, her aunt, because she liked dating the boys and dancing with them in Weldon. She married a conductor on the Seaboard Railroad.
We had lots of family on the railroad and lots of losses from jobs on the railroad.
Well, T.F., he worked for the railroad. He was the manager of the railroad at Weldon. He was killed in the railroad yard. He was run over by a train.
My great-grandmother, she became a single mother very early on in life when her husband died on the railroad. Her brother and sister helped her build the house, which is 401 Elm Street, and she turned it into a boarding house to make her way with 3 small children.
The coming of the railroad marked a turning point for Weldon, bringing with it opportunity, hardship, and transformation. Its tracks not only carried goods and people, but also reshaped the town's identity, leaving a legacy still felt today. New ideas and diverse people continuously flowed through Weldon, fueling its growth and character.
The Roanoke News, it was a weekly newspaper.
Founded in 1878, the Roanoke News was a vital voice for the community.
My granddaddy, he owned the newspaper.
In 1937, B.F. Turner became the publisher.
That newspaper reached far and wide across the United States and other countries as well, the mailing list. It wasn't that many, but it went everywhere. At the end of his life, it was the oldest weekly newspaper in North Carolina.
We believe that the year 1899 is to be one of the most eventful in the history of Weldon, and that it will usher in more new enterprises than any dozen past years. The building of a cotton factory in the near future only points to greater enterprises. Roanoke News, January 12, 1899.
In December 1898, the Weldon Cotton Manufacturing Company was formed by prominent Weldon citizens.
The economic vitality that was getting expressed in America at the time was mill-related.
The South was seeking a new economic strategy, and Weldon's leaders recognized the potential of the river and the canal to create new economic opportunity.
And they realized that they could use that water power to generate electricity. Tom Emory, I want to say he was a captain in the Confederate Army. And he ended up in Weldon. He owned several buildings in town. He ended up becoming the mayor of Weldon. Well, Emory wasn't in on the game. So he's going, well, if this works, I will go upstream to a bigger water source and I'll build a bigger dam. I'm not restricted by the size of the water flowing through the navigation canal. I'm gonna go up there and build a big structure and I'm gonna start my own power plant. So he gets that project off the ground and running. Then he had something to sell, which was, come here, we'll give you power. He ended up being sort of the father of Roanoke Rapids, as he was also the mayor of Weldon.
In the late 19th century, many Southern farmers faced difficulty earning a living because of declining agricultural prices. Work in the new textile mills offered a promise of steady work and wages, a compelling factor for many struggling families. Mill owners actively recruited workers, particularly white farmers.
So once you had gone and created that energy, there's no need to look back. And Weldon, at the same time, was its own jewel, and it's just a different size flower garden.
1900, that was kind of the boom period of the residential area.
They built great big houses in Weldon. I lived in one and grew up in one.
And it was a beautiful town, too. They had a very active garden club, and all the women would meet. They would plant azaleas and dogwoods everywhere, and it was just a beautiful, well-kept town.
As civic pride grew, Weldon established its public school system in 1905, greatly enhancing educational opportunities for both whites and blacks.
This year saw the completion of both the white and Negro school buildings. The latter is a two-story frame structure with 2 classrooms on the first floor and 1 very large room, convertible to 2, on the second floor. The building is equipped with blackboards and new first-class double desks. Ample playgrounds are provided for both boys and girls. The Roanoke News, April 22, 1909.
This school was named the Halifax Training School and was a pillar of Weldon's black community from 1905 to 1957, when it was named the Ralph J. Bunch High School. In 1924, the Weldon Public Library opened.
On Tuesday, July 29th, the the public library was formally open to the public. The building will be open every day except Sunday. There are on hand at present books of fiction, reference travel, history, biography, science, and essays. Many valuable books and sets of books have been donated by citizens of the town. The Roanoke News, July 31st, 1924.
Weldon at one time had the highest per capita college graduate rate in the state. It was wealthy.
This was a community that had lots of different people who had lots of different perspectives.
Weldon thought of itself as a fairly cultured town.
My grandfather was Henry Farber, and he came from Vilnius in Lithuania to Weldon in approximately 1892. He came in through Baltimore, I believe, but he kept going south as a peddler until he felt comfortable. And apparently he stopped in Weldon and chose it. He spoke only Yiddish as far as I know, and had to pick up the English, here and there. But people were enchanted with him because he was a Jew, and Jesus was a Jew, and they felt this is a holy man. Those are the stories that I heard, which is really remarkable.
Henry Farber slowly brought his family over. My grandfather, Morris, took the train and as far as the money would take him. And he ended up in Weldon. And he ended up peddling socks on the corner where our store eventually was.
My grandfather came to America in 1912. He was a young man, he was 17 years old, and he learned to be a shoe repairman. He had heard in the towns in North Carolina, they needed shoe repairmen. Of course, Weldon would have been the first stop in North Carolina, and it would have been a big train hub at that time. So he got off, and he found a few other Jewish families who were already settled.
Shema Yisroel.
Weldon became the center of Jewish life for several communities across 2 states. In 1912, the Hebrew Community Center of Weldon and Roanoke Rapids formed. And in 1954, they purchased a house that was remodeled into a synagogue, renaming themselves Temple Emmanuel.
It was more of a melting pot, probably, than most little towns. My grandfather and his 3 brothers, they were Catholic and attended a small little church over in Roanoke Rapids. One of them decided to settle in Rocky Mount, and the other 3 settled here in Weldon because of the railroad. And they were in the mercantile business, first by selling just on the road, and then had the store downtown. They made a tremendous effort to be part of the town. Education was a huge deal. And it was really promoted strongly, good work ethic to go along with it. So that's why, consequently, I think you saw everybody working in the store at some point in time to establish that work ethic.
My father left Greece in 1938 for a better life. So he went to Weldon, I think, right around 1940. Eventually bought his partners out and had the Carolina Cafe in Weldon. It took until 1948 to come to the States. And my father had come up from Weldon, and that's the first time I met him in New York. We got to Weldon on the train in the morning. The stories we had heard about America is that it is the land of milk and honey, wealth. You find money on the street. We got a cab and we rode through all these fine homes. I said, gosh, our house has got to be like that. That's fantastic. Well, we turned to our house. It was an old 2-story home, but it was in terrible shape. And it was the ugliest one on the block. But we get to this old ramshackle house, and we get out of the cab, and 3 little girls from the neighborhood came up to greet us with flowers. So the welcome that we got was just phenomenal. You go in a large city, you aren't going to find somebody next door to you that will welcome you or help you, whereas in Weldon, you could do that.
I think it provided my grandparents with a path to becoming Americans. How did that happen? It was the people. It was their neighbors. They had a very beautiful world in their family and in their own home, and that was a more traditional Jewish world that they were able to hold on to, but still become a part of this bigger community, small town that it was, because people were kind to each other, they valued each other, and they needed each other.
Weldon gave them the grounding that they needed, I think, to be able to go and be successful somewhere else.
I love that river. It's like the focal point of Weldon. It's a beautiful place.
It was close enough I could walk. And we used to go down and sit on the banks and fish. We caught mostly rockfish.
Rockfish have served as a vital food resource in the Roanoke Valley since the arrival of Native Americans. These fish primarily inhabit salt water, but travel up the Roanoke River to spawn at the rapids in Weldon.
And when the water temperature gets perfect and the speed of the water gets perfect, they spawn, and the eggs roll slowly down the river till they hatch. And because of the river speed, the eggs normally hatch in an area where there's food and there's few predators.
When I was growing up, it was a big deal in the springtime. It would be hundreds of trucks and boats down there.
And when the water was clear, we would troll with a silver spoon. And if the water was muddy, we fished with nets. Well, the biggest one I ever caught was 35 pounds. They catch them up to 50 and 60 pounds.
They would haul those fish in by the thousands.
Well, the river is a seasonal thing. The rockfish you hear so much about, they came up and that brought a lot of money in.
As the 1940s began, Weldon embraced this rich heritage by hosting an annual Rockfish Festival, complete with a parade, entertainment, and social gatherings known as muddles.
We would come to Weldon to buy rockfish. My mom, she could take the head and the tail part and boil it and make a muddle.
They would cook it in a black pot, and over an open fire, and just like a Brunswick stew, they would stir it and keep it going, and it really got good when you saw the bones come to the top.
We had onions, potatoes,
celery and red pepper,
tomatoes and parsley, and you just stew it all together for hours.
And then you would eat the muddle.
It was so good, so good.
Good friends getting together and enjoying the bounty that is natural.
The Roanoke River brought rockfish, beauty, and power to Weldon, but it also had the potential to unleash destruction.
In 1940, right after we moved here in the fall of the year, Weldon was flooded, And you see animals and houses and things like that floating down the river. And in fact, the town was almost completely surrounded.
Downtown Weldon was underwater. The only way you could get in and out of town was over the railroad track.
The water was right up to them. I'm afraid they washed the bridge away.
I found it very exciting. I was a 10-year-old. The misery part never dawned on me. I remember people diving off of William Thorne's roof because the water was up to the roof of his house.
I just remember we had a lot of pictures of my dad standing out, you know, up to here in front of the store.
You didn't have any sewage or any running water. I mean, it was terrible.
The flood reminded the community of nature's might, a force that could devastate in an instant. Little did they know, another wave of destruction loomed on the horizon as the world prepared to plunge into the chaos of World War II.
About December, the Army sent a whole company of troops. They bivouacked down at the community center, and there were tents and soldiers, and they dug in on each side of the 3 bridges, and they were guarding the bridges, thinking saboteurs were going to come. We would invite soldiers to come and have Sunday dinner with us. And so that brought the war to Weldon, and that made us very conscious of it.
My father, Harry Freed, enlisted in the Army in 1942. He became a bombardier. First mission, he was shot down. They hit their target, were heading back, shot down over Yugoslavia. Was able to pull his parachute, landed under an apple tree, as he said. Reached up to grab an apple, and they came from all angles with guns to his head and took him, and he was a prisoner of war from that point. So that was July 44. They did get a telegram saying he was missing in action. So after 6 months or so, they just assumed, you know, he was not alive anymore. The community, they had a parade in his, what they thought, I guess, was his memory. And then Christmas Day, a letter came. That was the first. So that had been 6 months, and they got their first letter from him saying that he was, you know, where he was. He was a lucky one. You know, he survived. There was a reunion, and my mom, I remember her saying, "You've never seen so many men crying," and just the bond.
Everybody gathered in the town of Weldon on the weekends. On Saturdays, you could hardly move.
When I was small, they were on the horse and buggy.
And the train station was a popular spot in Weldon.
I love Weldon, and I can remember going downtown was the highlight of my life, you know.
I remember Weldon being a thriving city where if you walked down the sidewalk, you could not move unless you were bumping into someone. Being a taller person, I could look down the street and see the heads of people, and it was head to head from one block, beginning of one block to the next part.
It wasn't until I was 12 years old that she would actually let me go downtown by myself.
Washington Avenue was the main street in Weldon, and that was where all the stores were, and the bank, and the post office.
Professional people.
3 barbershops.
We had drug stores.
They had 3 car dealers here.
Grocery stores, clothing stores.
5 or 6 filling stations, a lot of places to eat.
You need to go to the doctors. There were doctors, black and white.
West First Street, where all of the black businesses were.
Weldon had everything that a person would need. And to get me ready to go to college, my mom took me over to Weldon to shop. And I got everything I needed from Freed's department store, clothes.
Our store was very progressive, I feel like, as far as the clothes that they carried, very up to date, had customers from counties all around. People would come from all over to shop there. Miss North Carolina came to be outfitted there. He was a risk taker. His favorite thing to say was, I know you're not going to buy this, I just want you to try it on. 9 out of 10 people would walk out with it. So he was quite the salesman.
People from Weldon know that the Jewish-owned department stores were the Freeds, the Farbers, the Josephsons, the Kittners.
So yes, we knew them, and well, they knew some of us by name because that was basically the only place that we had to shop, and they did sell quality merchandise.
Kittners was our main store, and I can remember the smell of the new clothing in Kittners. It was very enjoyable.
Mid to late 40s and the 50s, Weldon was a booming place to be.
The Halifax County area, it was a manufacturing area.
The plentiful power generated by the river continued driving significant industrial growth. Textile mills, paper production, and agricultural processing ushered in a new era of economic prosperity.
It was J.S. Turner and Son, which was in the 3rd generation, and Weldon Veneer, and then Coastal Lumber Company. And they were the 2nd largest producer of hardwood lumber in the world. And we produced quality lumber that went to the furniture factories in the western part of the state.
That lumber and other products moved on the railroad.
Weldon Fruit and Produce Company sold fresh fruit primarily. And my father went to work there. He loved it. He was the #1 salesman for the company. I would hear him talking to customers on the phone on Saturday nights, getting orders for Monday delivery. And you could tell he was just a born salesman. He would describe some of the fruit that they had to sell, and you could almost taste it the way he described it.
Fortunate for Weldon at that time, every business was owned by somebody that lived in Weldon except Rose's 5 and 10 and the A&P store. And the churches were a big thing.
Sunday school first, and then church. I sang in the choir. Youth fellowship on Sunday night, because if you didn't go to youth fellowship, you couldn't do anything else.
So interesting for us. We had these good friends, and about half of them were Baptists and half of them were Methodists. And on Sunday nights, the Methodists always got out before the Baptists did. But then we would all get together and go to different friends' houses. And it was just a really wonderful childhood and young adulthood for us.
What was my life like? I skated on every sidewalk there was in town. I could go to anybody's house because they knew me.
In a place like Weldon then, you about knew everybody or they knew you.
Screen doors were open.
The term that I've always used when I've spoken of my home, as I still call it, is a nurturing environment.
The one thing that I laugh about now is if, growing up in Weldon, if you got crossways with an adult, you'd get chastised by that adult, and by the time you got home, you got chastised by your parents too, because the word would have just, gotten home before you did.
I thought it was a great environment for one to grow up in, to develop in.
The closest thing that I could come, I guess, to describe in Weldon would be the Andy Griffith Show with Mayberry.
I felt that I belonged. I felt very at home, and as I think about it, very blessed to have had this experience.
I learned how to swim in the swimming pool. My folks would buy a season pass. I just lived there all summer, as did every kid in Weldon who was Caucasian. And the colored kid swam in the Roanoke River, which I wasn't allowed to go near. I finally confessed to my mother when I was 50 years old that I actually went swimming with the colored kids in the Roanoke River.
I remember distinctly separate seating in the movie theater in downtown Weldon and in my doctor's office in Weldon. And it upset me so much. I did not understand the segregation between blacks and whites.
I wasn't aware of what was going on across the tracks until I got to Carolina and started editorial cartooning, and then realized that the world's different.
I don't think I was aware that Halifax County was majority non-white. You know, the power base was of course much along the lines of the white individuals who lived here, but it wasn't at the point that there was disengagement. You could still have interaction. There was a group that wanted to keep things separate, but there was an active and interested group, I think, in let's see how this can work.
In 1957, the beloved Halifax Training School was renamed.
There was a move to name that school for an outstanding African American who was Ralph Bunch.
First grade through 8th grade, I went to Ralph J. Bunch, which incidentally was right across the street from me. So I got to walk to school, my elementary years.
I started in Ralph J. Bunch Elementary School, and I can remember that being one of the most terrifying days of my life.
I always enjoyed going to school, and I can remember once I broke my arm, and my mom didn't want me to go to school the first few days, and I was really sad. I can remember this little red rocking chair that I would sit in and, just look out the door at the kids, playing and the buses.
I've learned to appreciate teachers at that time who really cared. They were hard, but they insisted that you learned and did the things that you need to do.
They saw us, they understood what we could be, and made sure that we were not going to be allowed to sit on the sidelines. Later, when I began to understand how nurturing it was at Bunch, the level of attention that the teachers gave us there, very influential teachers in our lives.
In 1964, Weldon began voluntary integration of the public schools.
As an 11th grader, I came to Weldon High School, and I was the first black to attend. They were in search of someone who would be the trailblazer, and my father was one of, I'll say, the activists in the area. I was the only black in the high school. Sometimes you have to lead by example, and I think that this is where that came in. How could he persuade people that this is what what needed to happen and have nobody to send. So I was the one who was sent. I was the sacrificial lamb. It was a shock. It was definitely different. There were several young ladies who were more than friendly. But for the most part, everything was negative. After the first year of me being at Weldon High School, others transferred from Bunch.
Zenobia Cofield is a hero, and I have a great deal of admiration for her. And I think she really blazed the path in Weldon.
These were uncertain times.
There were white schools that kind of mushroomed up because there were students and their families did not want this mix.
So I had gone to school with people from first grade, and we go to 11th grade, and all these people that I grew up with were gone elsewhere to other schools to live with relatives somewhere else.
My parents said to me when I was in high school, "We will give you a choice." And I remember saying, "Mom and Daddy, I want to go to the public school." They left the decision entirely up to me. And I actually lasted for 1 year in the public school only. I remember bomb threats. It was, and honestly, I think it was difficult for these black students also it was a change for them.
Ralph J. Bunch Elementary School ceased to exist, and the students that attended there were sent either to Weldon Elementary School, which had been the predominantly white school, or to other schools within the county. I ended up at Andrew Jackson Elementary School in Halifax.
All of the teachers there were sent out to different schools, and I was a new principal, new experience for everybody. And being in elementary school, there was no bigotry, there was none of the racial hatred. Everything was lovely, and those young kids loved their principal.
The first year was hard, I think, for all of us. No use of the N-word or anything like that, but it was just the two sides getting used to each other. That was the biggest challenge.
When I arrived at Weldon High School in 1972, I met lots of people who were veterans of the Ralph Bunch School. They were very proud of their school. They were very proud of the quality of education that they were providing for those African-American students. They had lots of school spirit. I heard lots of stories about the rivalries that went on the basketball court and the football field between the schools that they competed against. They were very proud of that school. But I didn't get the feeling just from the Ralph Bunch folks. I got the same kind of feeling from the white students and the white teachers who had worked at Weldon High School. So when we ended up merging those schools, I was getting that kind of quality school spirit along the way. From what I heard, that the school district faculty did go through some changes to try to make sure that they were able to work together, to put aside the racial differences, and to work for the students who were coming in, whether they were of no matter what race or creed or color that they had. So it was a wonderful place to work during the beginnings of full-scale integration in Weldon City Schools.
The 8th grade, I had a white teacher, Mr. Chambliss. He was history, and he restored my confidence. He really did. Again, race is very sensitive, but the whites in Weldon, the overwhelming majority, were very warm to me.
I had several teachers that do come to mind from high school. My science teacher, Mr. Shields, had a significant impact on me and the way I kind of grew up. Miss P.A. Barnes was an English teacher who had sort of an eclectic way of teaching English and really teaching us about being young adults. She was married to our football coach, Roy Barnes, who was also an influencer, I think, on me as I grew up.
I had third grade at Ralph J. Bunch. When they started integrating the schools, asked me to go to Weldon Elementary. And so I told them I would go. And I started in the fourth grade, I believe. And that's how I met Bert. She was one of my students.
Fourth grade, I had my first African-American teacher, Mrs. Hawkins, and I have wonderful memories of Mrs. Hawkins that have stayed with me and been important to me my whole life. When I was in fourth grade, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I can remember Mrs. Hawkins, and I can remember that she stood up that next morning and she said that she wished President Johnson could come to see our class because we all got along so well, and basically saying that this was the way it was supposed to be. And that really has stayed with me my whole life.
The story of Weldon is marked by moments when the current shifted and the community was asked to adapt, to grow, and to face painful realities. From the struggles of segregation to the long journey toward integration, Weldon has known both turbulence and resilience. As the town entered the late 20th century, broad economic change became not just possible, but necessary.
And my granddaddy, I remember him going to a lot of meetings trying to recruit industry to come here to Weldon and Halifax County. You know, he knew that was the future to keep Weldon going.
The Roanoke News, when it ceased in operation in 1988, it was the oldest newspaper in the state of North Carolina.
Of course, a lot of people, just like myself, we went away to college and we didn't come back.
Weldon slowly declined.
I had the sense in growing up that Weldon was content to be what it was. And I think the problem with that is when you don't look ahead, if you're satisfied with where you are and don't want to change, things are going to change around you.
By the time you realize, uh-oh, we've slipped, you've slipped to a point where it's almost impossible to return to where you are.
What couldn't be seen, just like we can't see today, is what do we know it's going to be like in 100 years? We have no idea. But there will be something.
I grew up in Weldon's heyday, when it was really at its peak. While it's depressed economically, it still has the character, and it has the natural resources, the beauty, and the history is still there to see. And the people haven't changed. They're still as independent, as faithful, as caring as they ever were.
This is where we live, or this is our legacy. This is our heritage, and we have to make Weldon the best that it could be. But it takes work, and it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you keep pushing, you keep giving, then eventually it would happen.
In 2025, a wave of energy is flowing through Weldon once again. A grassroots coalition of current and former residents is working to breathe new life into this historic river town. What began as a single brainstorming session in 2021 has grown into a vibrant movement. Weldon in Action, bringing together voices from across the community, launching local projects, and creating a nonprofit to guide long-term progress. Partnering with regional development agencies, tourism partners, the local government, and the community college, a flood of new projects is beginning to rise. Signs of renewal are appearing along the Roanoke's banks. New industry, thriving small businesses, and fresh investment in tourism, all carried forward by the momentum building in and around town. Guided by the vision of its people, Weldon is steering the current toward a future shaped by the spirit, resilience, and hope of the entire community.
For me, the connection lies with the environment and the outdoors and the landscape and the river.
My heart will always be here in Weldon. I love this place.
Being from here is not a minus, it's a plus. You're from Weldon. You know, we expect you to step out. We expect you to be great, and you never have to do it on your own.